let's get things started. So, counteroffers. Well, look, I guess first of all, what is a counteroffer? So, I mean, ultimately, a counteroffer is an offer made in response to another offer. Um, I think it's a hot topic right now. Industry stats within recruitment suggest that approximately 50% of businesses uh, or 50% of candidates, sorry, when they resign, experience the counter-offer situation. Now, I'm going to be honest and say from a personal Simply Commerce experience, I'd say that number is slightly higher, probably just north of 75%. But that just goes to show how the market is right now. It gives a real reflection on the fact it is a candidate-driven market.
Mhm.
So some of you are probably asking, why is that number so high? And ultimately, why do companies give counter offers? So before we get things started on the why, I think I just want to highlight here that there are many reasons why sort of counter offers can occur. It's important to be clear that each of these reasons and scenarios need to be approached on a case by case basis. Sometimes there'll be genuine reasons, other times maybe not so much. So I'm going to get things started. But hi, thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for sharing some comments. Good to see you all. Like I said, if you can share some personal scenarios or situations around counter offers, then we'll certainly be coming on to those at a later date in the show. So going back to why. Firstly, one of the biggest reasons we're seeing counter offers is staff retention. I mean, you obviously prevent disruption to projects or employee morale. People generally don't like change, and as soon as one person was to leave, there's obviously a spiral effect that can happen with another person or potentially many more people then leaving the office for similar reasons. Secondly, and maybe one that is quite rife in the recruiting industry right now, and that's costs. If we're being honest, no one likes to pay recruitment fees, right? And unfortunately for us recruiters, counter offering somebody could be more cost effective to the business than paying a substantial recruitment fee. On top of the fee, you have the potential downtime and the impact that can have on the project that person's working on, the handover, and then obviously further disruption that could cause. You also have market awareness. There's businesses that are just generally naive to what the market is paying. So they could be underpaying or have a package that isn't satisfactory to the market and not even be aware of it. So, I mean, in this case, you might find that's a genuine reason from the business. Other points to consider as well is sort of fear of loss. Can that person be replaced internally? Again, what disruption could that potentially cause? Or a genuine misunderstanding around sort of role expectations, progression, and a lack of communication, which could be sparked by handing in your notice.
Mhm.
The last thing I just want to stress here is that there's probably many more reasons. These are a select few that we see on a regular basis. And as I said at the start, everyone needs to be approached on a case by case basis. So again, who wants to share some personal stories here? Don't be shy. We do want to
Mhm.
debunk some of these and talk through them. So yeah, feel free to get involved and we'll answer them where we can.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing to add on that as well, James, is, not all counteroffers need to be perceived as negative either. And we can touch on that later on as well, where we run through some scenarios. But, like you mentioned, it is all about a case by case. What is the driving factor? And why have you been presented with a counteroffer? So kind of leads me on quite nicely to, like, why do people consider a counteroffer? But what I would urge people to do at this point is start with this question: why did you look for another opportunity in the first place? There would have been drivers to look out on the market, or engage in a conversation about another opportunity. And, that could be a number of things. It could be simply money, it could be progression opportunity, sort of technology you're working with, could be location. So ask yourself at the start, can any of these be changed with a counteroffer? And if the answer is yes, prepare yourself for a counteroffer. If the answer is no, still prepare yourself for counteroffer. James, you mentioned, 50 and like probably over 50% of candidates will receive a counteroffer. The more you can be prepared for that, the better. But understanding your drivers and why before you engage in any potential new job opportunity will be really critical to helping you decipher the counteroffer. Now look, many things can lead somebody to considering that when the time comes. Convenience is a big one. You might know your business well, you get on with your team, you've already built up so many fundamental relationships, and you're comfortable with what you know, and you kind of sit in your comfort zone there. Another one is you don't need to learn new processes, new structures, a new team. And, that kind of comfortability can often lead people to consider a counteroffer and not reflect their drivers. It's fear of the unknown, uncertainty in making a change, and quite a big change in some people's lives with the job. But the one thing that I've had from experience with dealing with so many candidates, and James, I'm sure you've had the same, is loyalty and emotions, feeling guilty for leaving, not putting yourself first in a counteroffer situation, and kind of sticking out because your team really like you and you're such a big part of the business. But making an emotionally led decision and not looking at the facts could actually be a bit more detrimental in the long run, where you might find yourself back on the market because you've not considered your drivers in the first place. So I'd be keen to know if anybody in the chat who's joining us today has ever experienced something of a counteroffer where you've considered it. And Jake, you're absolutely right. Counteroffers are not always money related, and we'll get onto that actually in shortly when we talk through some scenarios. But I think that kind of ties things up quite nicely, really. And there are so many reasons why people find it difficult when faced with a counteroffer. Me and James would like to play devil's advocate here and discuss some scenarios of when you shouldn't accept a counteroffer, but also when you should. Let's have a look. Who have we got going on in the chat?
Yeah, there's a few interesting comments here.
Yeah.
Jake, you touched upon it, but obviously they're not always financially related. Sometimes they can be to do with progression. They can be to do with you might want to leave because you've had an argument with your manager, or the company's progression isn't aligned with your personal progression. There's so many different reasons why you might go through the resignation process to then receive a counteroffer, which is why we stressed at the beginning, look, everyone has to be treated on a case-by-case basis, and we've talked through some of the reasons why they might happen. And as Jess mentioned, we're going to run through some scenarios shortly where we give our personal opinion as to whether or not there should be one that is considered realistically or not. One thing I would say is that we do find more often than not is that they are money related when you actually get down to the bottom of it. Whilst they may not be perceived to be money related at the start, almost always that the net salary is one of the deciding factors when it comes to somebody's decision. And let's be honest, right? Yes, we want to enjoy work and we want to progress and learn and develop, but ultimately we have a lifestyle that we need to pay for. We have bills we need to pay, which are increasing substantially at the minute. So money is a very big factor to an awful lot of people. So it's definitely something that's important for people.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of really what you've asked there, Jake, is leading us into scenario one. So, you're put yourself in the shoes right now. You're wanting to leave because opportunity based, you've reached a glass ceiling in your current company, you don't really feel challenged anymore, but your current company counteroffer is an increase in salary and a promise to be considered for promotion. Now we're going to argue both sides of this, but this goes back to the drivers. Time and time again, you'll see companies sort of throw money at counteroffers, but if money isn't the driver, it might be a short-term fix, but it's not going to be the long-term sustainable fix that person is looking for. So, you're not really getting the commitment you want from your current employer. It's a bit of an open-ended promise. The money could be nice for a short while, but will it fulfill, longer-term objectives for you? And if it's not money related, you could say in this scenario, don't take the counteroffer. It's one of those sitting on the fence ones, but you've got to do what's right for you and look at your drivers.
I think for me, the biggest thing here is the promise to be considered for promotion in 6 months. I mean, what's a promise? There's no guarantee there. And unfortunately, this is one we see a lot when companies can't actually do anything to the role here and now. They do they do offer to increase. More often than not, they offer to match the salary rather than increase it, which is a point that Tanya mentioned a few minutes ago in the chat. But I think the biggest thing here is the promise to be considered. And I think really, realistically, if you're going to be considering that counter offer, you need some kind of actual commitment, because what you will probably find here, and again, I can't say it's guaranteed, but there's a good chance that in that 6 month period, either that conversation won't happen or it won't go your way. And then you're sat there thinking to yourself, I maybe missed out on a good opportunity here. I could have learned a lot in that period of time. Would have been out of my depth for a little bit, but actually that's where you learn and where you grow. And by that point, you would be comfortable, yet now you're in a position where you're possibly going to start looking for another role again. So I would say, as a tip, don't just accept any promise, regardless of how good your relationship is with your manager, because sometimes that may be out of their hands as well. Definitely look to get some kind of guarantees in place to really make this a serious proposition.
Yeah, definitely. And scenario 2 now, then let's look at purely the money. Your drive is to move purely because you want an increase in salary. You like your company, you like your team, you're happy with your progression, but it's just the money's not quite reaching the mark that you need it to be. But your employer has offered to increase your salary to a new offer that you have. You could argue, why were you not being paid that in the first place? Again, goes back to what James mentioned earlier on. Some companies might be naive to the current market, or maybe it is a tactical counter offer to keep you and save themselves some costs. I think for me is going with how genuine the counter offer feels and that relationship you have with your current employer at this point. But look, if you're looking for more money and you're counter offered with more money, which meets your current offer, you could argue, take it.
Definitely. Look, if you like your team, you like the company, you like your progression, if there is really no other motivations to move other than money, then for me, this is one that I would probably be taking, because why would you move on if you like everything else about the business that you're currently working at? As you said, Jess, there's always reasons as to why maybe you shouldn't, but in this case, I would probably err on the side of let's take that counter offer. However, the one thing I would say is use that point to your advantage, and if you can, try and negotiate a little bit more. Right now you're in the hot seat. You can chuck some demands around, and don't just accept kind of their first offer. Go back and see if you can negotiate as much as possible.
Definitely, kind of future proof yourself from a financial perspective as well. Yeah, I would agree with everything you just said there, James.
Awesome. Should we quickly answer Yahiri's question, as I believe it's related to scenario 1? And he said, what kind of guarantee would you advise? And look, these conversations are always hard, and I get anything contractual is going to be very hard. Jake mentioned above, we want to get this in writing with clear goals as to how to achieve it. I think that's definitely a good starting point. Anything you get needs to be in writing, so there's a trail that can be passed back. If you could have HR involved in any type of conversation as well, again in writing, that's only going to add weight to it. But also importantly, if it isn't a guarantee and there is certain steps needed to achieve it, you want to make sure they're clear. You want to make sure they're realistic, achievable, and again, also in writing. So come period of time, you can sit down and say, I've done this, 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 and this. And then you would hope that the employer then comes through with their end of the bargain as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think ensuring that there's also, the support that you need to achieve those goals. It's all about them being realistic. So setting, milestones or timeframes as to when each goal is set to be achieved will help you keep on track. But yeah, I think having it in writing, having a clear expectation of when to hit it and how to hit it is what I'd advise.
Awesome. Should we move on to scenario 3 then?
Let's do it.
Scenario 3 is you're a passive candidate who has been headhunted and offered a new role. Your current employer counter offers with an increase in salary and responsibilities. However, it doesn't actually match the offer that you've received. So they've increased your salary, but it still sits slightly lower than the new salary that you have received. So what do you do here? What are your thoughts, Jess?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and actually one that I think is extremely common given the demand in the market at the moment. You know, lots of people are being headhunted. There are lots of opportunities flying about. There are a lot of passive candidates, you know, open to hearing about new opportunities. So I think this could be more common than what people might think. You know, there is an area to sit on the fence with this one, but I think consider what impact that money would have on you and the change of responsibilities. You know, is more responsibility what you want? You know, you might not want to have more responsibility, but it might just be the money, in which case a slight increase and lift in salary might satisfy you, but you know, you're not looking for any increase on your day-to-day work. So you know, you could argue quite easily that, you know, it's a fair meet in the middle. Again, I would just really emphasize the fact of going back to your drivers. Even if you have been headhunted and you are passive on the market, there is a reason why you engaged in that process, and you have to weigh up the value that you put on each of those drivers when it comes to a counter offer. Sometimes the grass isn't always greener, you know, and it's about, are you wanting to take that risk, or are you not? So you could argue both sides with this. I think it really comes down to the impact and what each part of that counter offer means to you, whether it's money, whether it's responsibilities, whether it's progression, you know, whatever your current company might put on the table for you at that point in time. And again, future proofing yourself. What does it all mean to you? You've got to consider the short and long term impacts of both options.
Yep, for sure. And I think there's obviously lots that's been discussed right there, and they're all valid points, Jess. And the one other thing I'd add to that is just setting up a pros and cons of each position. Your offer, staying with your current business, all the things that are important to you: money, progression, people, culture, travel, whatever it might be, and just doing a pro and a con and putting a tick in the box for the one that meets your personal demands the easiest. I've actually spoken to candidates that have had like a crazy formula for and an algorithm for how they chose their role, and it was like a whole Excel spreadsheet long. And I think that's quite excessive, but whatever works for you. But certainly recommend putting a pros and cons list, everything that's important to you, tick the box, and then obviously whatever side has got the most ticks normally would come out on top. But the one thing I would definitely stress is don't make any emotionally led decisions, because often they can be the ones that are regretted. So obviously that could fall either way, but I would suggest thinking about it methodically, covering all the different points that you mentioned, Jess, and then making your decision. This is definitely one that we see a huge amount, and is by far the most common at the minute with regards to passive candidates, and just seeing what's on the market, and then obviously finding themselves in this situation maybe 4 to 5 weeks down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I've just spotted a comment from Win. Is it awkward to accept a counter offer? Never experienced it, but wonder what anyone's gone through, and if they felt their employer might have been awkward or changed their attitude towards them. Look, it's one of those things you're never going to know until you're in the situation, right? But I think as long as you approach any conversation with honesty and transparency, there's no reason for it to be awkward. You know, these conversations can be sensitive at times, but you know, in my opinion, if your employer values you within their team, then there's no reason for it to be, you know, awkward.
Yeah, I mean, look, if things are awkward once you've accepted a counter offer, you've probably made the wrong decision, right? So, I mean, it might be a little bit too late then, but at least ultimately you will then know that actually the time is right to move on. Unfortunately, these things are part of business. It happens. You may need to move on to progress your career or to make more money. It's just the way life works. So I think if you find yourself in that situation and your employer does make it awkward, then, like I said, I think you've made the wrong decision. I think we might have missed a comment from Babu as well. Apologies. So Babu has asked about moving businesses if there's no growth, and look, definitely. Like I guess ultimately it depends what you want out of your next role. If you want growth and your company can't offer it to you, then it kind of makes the decision for you. If you're not fussed about growth and you're happy just doing what you're doing and you're paid well, for argument's sake, then maybe not. So again, it goes down to your drivers for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's all kind of personal opinion, personal preference. What are your long-term goals? And if that doesn't align with what your current company can offer you, then yeah, you could argue, you know, it is the right time. So yeah, I would agree with what you've just said there, James.
Awesome. And just with your point about loyalty, loyalty is important, but do you know what we're seeing? We're not 25 years ago now where people would work for the same business for 15, 20 years. There's so much innovation, there's so much competition. People are moving, and actually, Joe, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? When people change jobs or new people join new companies, new ideas, fresh ideas come into the business that help that business evolve as well. So actually, I think it's healthy for people to have these conversations and to have an element of job changing. Yes, I wouldn't change jobs every 18 to 24 months, but actually maybe 3 to 4 years is probably a good idea. But again, as industry dependent as well. Some industries move faster than others and everything else. But I know when I first got into recruitment, people would look for a tenure of like 8 to 10 years on CVs. And I mean, that's unheard of these days.
Yeah.
We've got any other questions coming through then, guys? Jake, nice to be getting. Oh, who have we got here? LinkedIn user, anonymous. Oh, okay. At the moment, the driver for me is support and opportunities to build my skills as a junior. I accepted an offer 6 months ago, but received an offer from a smaller company around the same time. You turned it down for a high salary, but feel that your current team is not mature enough to support me as a junior. How do you approach a company that I turned down for further opportunities? I love that question, Joe. Sometimes you can make the wrong mistake, right? And the wrong choice. And if I'm being completely honest with you here, I would just say, get in touch with them, whoever you spoke to last, whether it be the HR or recruitment representative or the manager themselves, and just say, look, I really enjoyed meeting with you beforehand. I did say no, but Joe, what I've come to think about it, I think I made the wrong decision for these reasons, and I'd love to see if we can pick back up on a conversation. They will love that. You're being honest, you're being open and transparent, and you're being proactive around it as well. So actually, I would say this afternoon, reach out to them, go with your gut feel. If your gut's saying you made the wrong call, then listen to it and see what can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Go with your gut. And, I think this really highlights, a classic example of not burning any bridges, because sometimes you make the choice that a few months down the line think, oh, I should have made a different decision. But yeah, absolutely. Go back to them, be honest and, do it today.
For sure. And do you know what? Let us know how you get on. I'd love to know if that piece of advice has helped you. So feel free to drop me through a message following this and just let us know if that was useful. And if you want any tips or any help with putting that approach together, more than happy to help. I don't know who you are at the minute, but maybe I will before close of play today. Jake, would you expect your employer to make an offer or hint to get him one? Again, good question. I would always put, well, Joe, if you went into that conversation wanting a counter offer, then potentially hint at it. But I would put the onus on the employer. You want the employer to show you that they want you. So that would be my initial response. What about you, Jess?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's always, really telling if your company doesn't counter offer you. If they value you, you do your job well and they don't want to lose you, they will counter offer you. And if they don't, take that as, look into that. Don't analyze it too much, but definitely take that as part of your, your driving factor as to how you entered into that situation in the first place.
All right, so we'll do one more question then, Abidar. How to prove that the counter offer is serious, not a fake, just used just to get more from the manager. So you referring? I can only assume you're referring to your original offer to then draw the counter offer. You shouldn't need to prove it, to be honest with you. Obviously, you're kind of putting your neck on the line by handing in your notice in the first place. So not many people would do that without having a genuine offer there. So that's kind of the proof by you saying, look, I am going to leave you in my notice periods if you don't counter offer me. If I have misunderstood that question, then feel free to rewrite it and I'll come back to it. Apologies.
Yeah, I think, if it's true and it's official, you'll have it in writing. If it's not, again, it's just words. So yeah, any counter offer I'd get in writing from any employer.
Oh, definitely. You'd expect at least a recognition letter to acknowledge the changes that have happened, whether it be responsibilities, job title, money, however big or small, anything that's discussed, you want backed up in a letter, and really you want that sent through to you sooner rather than later. Because, again, unfortunately, we do see conversations happen, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, that conversation's died down, and by that point, the other opportunity has disappeared, and then you're kind of in this sticky situation where you've lost on the opportunity that you wanted. You're now with your employer that actually they can't do what they said they were going to do, and you're in that limbo point as to, okay, do you just bear with it? Do you look elsewhere? Do you go back to the other company?
Yeah.
So get it in writing. Get it in writing ASAP.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other comments? Anyone else want to get involved? Any questions that we can help you with? Or I'll tell you what, who has had a negative or a positive experience with a counter offer? And we've got a few minutes to go. Let's see how we can end this one.
Yeah, and I think the overarching, kind of takeaway point from here is, there are times to say yes and there are times to say no to counter offer. It's never, as black and white. But if me or James can help you with an outsider's impartial perspective and opinion on anything that you're going through, feel free to direct message us, and yeah, we're happy to help where we can.
Yeah, for sure. Look, there's nothing like a bit of impartial advice. And regardless of what people think of recruiters, I always try and give impartial advice, because you know what? This is your career, this is your decision, and it's obviously ultimately a very important one. So you need to make sure that you do weigh up the pros and cons and you make the right move. And that's fallen against me multiple times, but you know what? I'm okay with that because it's the right thing to do. So I hope that everyone has found this session valuable. Appreciate everyone getting involved. It looks like we're kind of nearing the end from a comments point of view. So yeah, we'll give it a few more seconds. If anyone's got anything that we can help them with right now, then do share it. But if not, as Jess said, feel free to reach out to us privately afterwards. I'm more than happy to try and help where we can do. Just on that note, obviously we've had some really positive feedback from the previous installment so far. Many people have dropped us messages saying, look, thanks, found this insightful, found this helpful. Some positive changes have been made already. And that's what this is about. So yeah, thanks for sharing it. We want to hear all these stories. So yeah, any questions we can help with, do let us know. This is going to be our last one for this year, but there are more coming next year, at least another 3. So if you've enjoyed them, then stay tuned.
Yeah.
Just finally, let's go back to Win, and then we'll wrap this up, hey? So Win, if you get a counter offer and unsure about accepting, would you go to the new company and see if they'll counter the counter offer?
It does happen.
It does. It does. The first thing I would say is you don't want to get yourself in a sticky situation. I've actually experienced this recently, and the company that offered the candidate originally actually withdrew their offer because they said they felt as though that their motivations had changed throughout the process to becoming purely selfish and financially related. I kind of understood, but I also disagreed as well, because reality is you want to make sure you're getting the best deal for your personal situation. So you need to be delicate when you have this conversation. I think I don't want to keep repeating ourselves, but what are you looking for in the first place? And going back and seeing if they'll pay a little bit more, is that really the most important thing for you? Have you got the salary increase that you're looking for? Have you got the bigger role, the better opportunity, whatever it might be? Ultimately, you've got to look at what is most important, and be prepared that if you have that conversation to get the counter, you may lose it. You may win. It's a bit of a gamble. I would always err on the side of saying no. Personally, I would say here's my 2 offers. I'm going to make the choice based on that. But I've seen it happen, and I've seen it happen successfully too. So
yeah,
it really depends on the strength of your drivers and what's the most important thing for you.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, look, there's been a few of you guys that have been really interactive, so thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Like we said, it's been we've enjoyed the first 3 episodes. Hopefully some of you guys have tuned into all 3 of them. If you have, then quickly put a yes in the comments box. Don't leave us hanging. As I said, this is the last one for this year. We've got a few more coming next year. Stay tuned. The next one is going to be the end of January, and all will be revealed via LinkedIn very, very soon.
Lovely. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.